Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs. We are live, episode 46, coming at you on this beautiful Wednesday evening in the Valley. I'm your host, Shane Gillette, and we have plenty to talk about in this week's MMA episode 46. We got a recap of UFC Fight Night Vegas 91, a little chat about some BKFC stuff, and then we are previewing another pay-per-view UFC in Rio de Janeiro. UFC 301 going down this Saturday. Again, I'm your host, Shane Gillette. Please like, subscribe, add comments if you're tuning into the audio version. But yeah, let's jump right in. We have some good fights that have been announced as I'm preparing to watch the 301 card in Seattle. I moved from Seattle to Phoenix not that long ago. Go visit some friends, family on a little bit of a work trip / fun trip. Just got done celebrating my girlfriend's 30th birthday. Had a lot of good times for the Dirty 30. So ready for a good pay-per-view card after a little bit of time off post UFC 300 buzz. And I know nothing's going to match the UFC 300, but UFC 301, a solid card with a bunch of storylines. So excited to dive into that. But we have a couple June fights being announced, not a ton this week. But we have Jared Cannonier, Nasruddin Imavov, a great bout June 8th. Excited to see that Jared finally got a UFC fight booked. He's been out, hasn't had a fight booked for a while. He's been ready. Borderline, a contender there and worthy of a title shot with some wins. Another win here will get him that much closer. He's deserving of it. The Killer Gorilla. We got the return of Dominic Reyes. He was supposed to return, had to pull out with some blood clot stuff. Got that handled, thank God. Now he's taking on Dustin Jacoby, also on that June 8th card. Another banger. We got the young prospects in the flyweight division. You don't always see prospects on the rise like this matching up this early. But Joshua Van had an opponent. Didn't quite work out. Tatsuro Taira had Tim Elliott as an opponent. He pulled out. So June 1st, we have the flyweight prospects, Tatsuro Taira and Joshua Van going at it. I am super hyped for that flyweight showdown. We got Miles Johns taking on Douglas Silva de Andrade June 15th. And then for UFC 303, we have the addition of Ricky Simone and Vinicius Oliveira. But elsewhere in the MMA world, we had BKFC Knucklemania 4 this weekend. I didn't get to watch the card in real time, but the fights don't last that long because it's so brutal that I got to really get everything I needed just watching the highlight clips on X, formerly known as Twitter. Where in the main event, Mike Platinum Perry does his thing. A easy round 1 TKO over Thiago Alves. Really, he just didn't want to get hit in the face by the Platinum Perry anymore. Mike Perry's built different. Calls out Darren Till, who supposedly turned down $2 million to fight Mike Perry in BKFC. We'll see if he is, willing to take the bread. We have in the heavyweight championship, Mick Terrell with a round 1 TKO over Lorenzo Hunt. Landed a really nice uppercut. Lorenzo fell back, dislocated his arm, pretty nasty stuff. And then we had the Big Ben Rothwell with a round 1 TKO over Todd Duffy. Another instance where Todd was just not wanting to get hit in the face again, kind of quit on it. BKFC, again, is just different. These guys, you land a couple shots, you're like fracturing teeth and stuff when it's bare knuckle. So you don't want much of Mick Terrell or Big Ben Rothwell. Hopefully they get matched up in a future Knucklemania. And Conor McGregor and McGregor Sports Entertainment swooping in to become a co-owner of BKFC. I'm assuming that will bring more buzz, obviously some more finances to the promotion and the sport. And then in the boxing world, the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul bout is officially going to be sanctioned as a professional boxing match. I think it's 8 2-minute rounds with like 10-ounce gloves, 14-ounce gloves, something like that. So that is going to actually be happening on Netflix at AT&T Stadium in Jerry World. And then blessings to Mr. Francis Ngannou. If you saw this go viral, social, everyone giving their condolences as he is mourning the death of his 15-month-old son. You do not wish that amongst anybody. So prayers to you, Francis Ngannou. But let's jump into the fight night card that went down on Saturday. UFC Fight Night Vegas 81. Your boy back with some good pick'ems. I went 8-2 in my picks. So overall, 46 episodes in. That puts me at 284 wins, 140 losses, 6 no contests or draws. And on the year, we're at 91 wins, 54 losses, 3 no contest draws. So doubled up on the total overall. For the year, not quite. Need to keep stacking up those dubs. And we're going to keep doing that. When I look at the fight night card this weekend, maybe MMA casuals weren't as hyped about it, but I thought there was going to be some fun fights in this card. That ended up being the case. Some good knockouts, some striker versus striker matchups. And I figured the main card would show out with the striking. I thought it did that much. So some fights we did not break down that were solid fights. Worth rewatching if you're an ESPN Plus subscriber. We had Ivana Petrovic with a round 3 submission over Liang Na via arm triangle choke. You know, your boy Shane loves an arm triangle choke. We had Chris Padilla with a round 1 submission over James Lontop via rear naked choke. And then for the big boys, a very close fight. There was some very close decision bouts on this card. Some may say controversial. We had Dontel Mays, who won a very close fight against Kyle Machado, the unanimous decision. And then Austin Hubbard with another very close unanimous decision victory over McCall Figlak. I actually did score for Hubbard. I did score for Dontel Mays. My issue isn't with the way the fights were decided on. Maybe more so the main card fight between, well, I guess it's the prelim fight. Let's see, was it prelim or main card? Did I not put it in here? The JSP fight. Wait, was that? Yeah, I was just looking at it. Come on now. I had more of an issue on the main card fight. David Onama's unanimous decision over Jonathan Pearson. We'll get more into that. But when the judges, when it comes to wrestling and grappling, are scoring takedowns or control time a certain way, yeah, maybe you're not landing a bunch of damage, getting a bunch of submission attempts, but then are kind of changing it up in different fights. That's where I have the issue. Is like, okay, well, if we're not scoring wrestling at all, why did you score wrestling in this bout with no damage and just top control time, but in this fight you didn't, you gave it the win to that person. So that's always my issue. I'm pro wrestling. If in a round my opponent lands 20 strikes, 15 of them significant, I land 18 strikes, maybe 5 significant, but I had 3 takedowns and 4 attempts and I controlled you for 3 minutes, I'm giving the round to the grappler. Even though maybe he didn't have a ton of ground and pound, but he was moving positions, he was keeping control of the fight. That's how GSP became a world-renowned fighter, and one of the bets, debatably the GOAT, is exactly with that game plan. And I think the UFC is trying to shy away from that. Judges are scoring takedowns and top control less and less, but I hate when it gets wishy-washy, and I think there was a lot of that in this weekend's events. But I did score for Dontel Mays, and I did score for Austin Hubbard. So we're kicking it off in the prelims. We had Victor Henry with a round 3 TKO over Ronnie Yaya. I love saying that name, Ronnie Yaya. But yeah, this was very little grappling in this fight, as Victor was just putting on a striking masterclass against Ronnie. And, Ronnie's been in the UFC for a long time, obviously a jiu-jitsu heavy guy. And, he looked like he was getting towards the latter part of his career. And Victor, who is fighting in his prime, was able to control distance, easily was controlling the center of the octagon, putting Ronnie up against the cage, and he was just kind of circling, running around for his life. And then kind of put in some half-assed takedown attempts. You know, they weren't pretty takedowns, not good technique. Looked like a jiu-jitsu guy trying to get takedowns. But round 3, Victor was finally able to put a stamp on this fight, get the finish. I personally thought with how much control he was in this fight, he could have been more aggressive with his striking. Sure, maybe Ronnie throws a big shot, can clip a guy. But when I'm controlling the fight this way, and your only path to victory is really a submission, maybe I'm not going to come in super close and get crazy where you could easily take me down, but I'm going to throw a little bit more volume, a little bit more heavy combos, and look to get that finish early. But either way, that's the only little bit of criticism for Victor Henry, who had a brilliant performance, a solid win for La Mangosta. Statistically, Ronnie landed 56 total strikes, 54 of those significant. He was 0 for 10 in takedown attempts. So when I say half-assed, these weren't like beautiful, solid technique, you know, in close, just head down, out from distance, sloppy takedown attempts. And Victor's good in his grappling, so you do have to give him credit. And he about tripled the volume of Ronnie with 150 total strikes, 109 of those significant. He had 2 knockdowns and was 0 for 2 in his own takedown attempts. So Victor now starts a new winning streak. He had a no contest before this fight. I thought he was going to lose before he got hit right in the jewels pretty tough. But his UFC record is now 3 wins, 2 losses, 1 no contest since 2022. And Ronnie extends his losing streak to 2. He has not got a victory since November of 2021. Now, I think the best matchup for Victor next, we got to give him Cody Garbrandt. I think that would be fantastic after his loss. And for Ronnie, if he is still in the UFC, I think that could be debatable. He could take on the young Cameron Simon, which set us up to the main card. Not a very deep card, but solid main card. We had Urosh Medic with a round 1 knockout over Tim Means. Performance of the night to the doctor, man. He keeps on cashing with these finishes. And this fight did not last very long. Urosh was able to clip Tim with a nasty uppercut as he was trying to close distance, and it really rocked him. Medic clearly went in for the finish. Tim was wanting to close distance in this fight. That was clearly his game plan, looking to clinch and grapple with Urosh, and it cost him. He knew Urosh is a finisher. You don't want to play with those hands, especially at 40 years old, and that's the way the cookie crumbled. Statistically, Tim landed 10 total strikes, 7 of those significant. He was 0 for 3 in takedown attempts, and Urosh landed 11 total strikes, 7 of them significant. He had the knockdown and was 0 for 1 in takedown attempts. So Urosh starts a new winning streak. He is 3-1 since 2022. I got to see an insane fight with him and Matthew Semmelsberger in Salt Lake City, which he should have lost that fight, and he was resurrected, came back and won. But he's continuing to finish everyone. Love to see this guy. He's 5-2 in the UFC now. Tim starts a new losing streak. He is 1-4 since 2022. So what's next? Well, I'd love to see Urosh take on Brian Battle. I think that's a fantastic stylistic striking battle. And for Tim, if he continues, how about Matthew Semmelsberger? I think the Dirty Bird and Semmelsberger, both those fights, great stylistic matchups for the fans. We're all winning. Moving on. A fight I got wrong, a fight I don't quite agree with. We had David Onama with unanimous decision over Jonathan Pierce. And again, this was a very, very close decision. It was a clash of style showdown. JSP was looking to get David down and control him in this fight. But he had sloppy positioning when he got the takedown. He had beautiful takedowns. And once he got David down, while he was trying to control him, he continually got reversed in positions by having sloppy posture, which is not very JSP-like, but I know David's kind of a longer, lanky guy. And he was able to either reverse himself, try to get some top control or some ground and pound, or get back on his feet. And David, I thought, landed the more significant strikes when they did have exchanges, but Jonathan definitely had his moments through the fight as well. I scored the fights. The way I scored the fight is I gave round 1 and 2 to JSP, and then I gave the third to David Onama. So again, this is a round-based matchup. I did not agree with the outcome. It was so close. I'm not super upset about it, but it really could have gone either way. but the way they were scoring grappling in the other bouts, I thought David showcased his cardio and was able to defend well, better than he has against a solid grappler in JSP, who really wasn't that far from fighting consistently in the top 15. Great takedown defense, and the ability to have that cardio while defending takedowns and striking the way they did for 15 minutes, a huge improvement for him. If I look at the round-based statistics even, from how this fight played out, I think it'll even back JSP, and we could talk a little bit about the specifics here with the judging, although it's never fun to talk about the judging. In round 1, JSP landed 15 total strikes, 15 significant. David landed 18 total, 14 significant. I will say David maybe landed a shot or two cleaner, but JSP did get a takedown, although it was 1 in 5 attempts, and Onama was able to reverse it. So, again, very close. I thought JSP was controlling. David was usually back to the octagon. He got the takedown, had some control time, and had some ground and pound, even though David reversed the position. So I'm giving 1 to JSP. That could be very close. Round 2, JSP landed 29 total strikes, 14 of them significant, with 3 takedowns, 3 for 3, a submission attempt, and a reversal. David only landed 6 total strikes, 5 significant, with a submission attempt and 3 reversals. So clearly, statistically, stats aren't always appropriate and tell the complete story, but JSP landed a lot more volume. Some of this was ground and pound. He got 3 takedowns, the reason being he got reversed a couple times. He got a submission attempt, so did David Onama. I thought clearly JSP won round 2. And in round 3, JSP landed 43 total strikes, 28 of them significant. David Onama landed 42 total strikes, so 1 less, but 39 significant, 11 more significant. He did reverse a takedown that JSP got. JSP was 1 for 6 in takedowns in the third, and he was 0 for 1 in his own takedowns. So I gave the third to David. I thought JSP won the first. I watched it back. I still feel that way. I know a lot of people are like, no, David clearly won. You could give him all 3 rounds because he landed more damage. But again, if JSP's landed 10 strikes to your 7, and maybe all 7 of yours are significant, he landed 2 significant, but I had a takedown, top control, ground and pound, and a submission attempt, there's no way that he's losing that round. So I hate to see it. Great win for David. Statistically, overall in the fight, JSP landed 86 total strikes, 57 of those significant. He had 5 takedowns and 14 attempts. He also had a submission attempt, a reversal, and 4 minutes and 49 seconds of control time, almost a complete round. David landed 66 total strikes, that's 20 less, and 58 of those significant. He had 1 more significant with a submission attempt, 5 reversals, 2 minutes and 15 seconds of control time, and was 0 for 1 in takedown attempts. So I guess you could say, if you want to be like JSP, if you think you won that fight, I haven't looked to see if he said anything on Twitter. He trains here in Arizona at a Fight Ready. You got to be careful when you're a grappler. You got to find ways to land damage. You got to get that ground and pound and improve positions and not get reversed. I think the reversals are really what lost him the fight. Sloppy positioning once he got the takedown. It's like the refs or the judges even forgot that he got the takedown. So David now extends his winning streak to 2. He's an impressive 4-1 since 2022, 4-2 in the UFC. Jonathan extends his losing streak to 2. He's now 3-2 since 2022. A lot different world than when he was on a 3-fight winning streak, about to fight in the top 15 before he had an opponent pull out. So what's next? I say give me David against Damon Jackson, the veteran. I think that's a great next step for Onama. And JSP can look to rebound in a fight against another veteran in Bill Algeo. Either way, excited for both of these guys' next opportunity in the octagon. Then we had the big dogs. We had Janata Deniz with a round 2 TKO over Austin Lane. Performance of the night, 50 G's to Deniz. 50 G's to Deniz. Like the way that sounds. But yeah, man, this was a tale of 2 rounds as Austin looked like a freaking D-end linebacker coming at you. He was bringing the offense, kickboxing, to a very, very good striking kickboxer. And I was like, whoa, did not expect this to happen. And then after landing about 15 good strikes and Denise kind of looking like he saw a ghost in there, a beautiful blast double leg takedown. Looked like he was trying to tackle a running back in open field. And, Denise wasn't able to do much with that. You could tell he is a kickboxer heavy style. He was flattened. Austin had top control for the rest of the round. Didn't do anything too crazy with it. Landed a couple big shots. And then round 2, I don't know. So I've never been that big and muscular, first off, where I'm that explosive. But when you know you're fighting 15-minute fights, you should put yourself in a position to cardio like 30 minutes, right? Hey, let's say I'm just in a sloppy, messy fight. I have to find a way to pull through. Well, round 2, Austin Lane was completely gassed. Denise started to let his hands loose. He could read the body language on him. And he was able to, once Lane was tired, he tried to get a takedown, couldn't finish it, pulled guard, which Austin Lane has no reason in hell to be pulling guard, and just kind of gave up. You could see the body language was over it, and that sloppy takedown attempt was kind of the last of them as Denise went in and looked to get a finish after letting his hands loose. So Austin statistically landed 43 total strikes, 17 of those significant. He had the 1 takedown in 4 attempts. And Janata landed 31 total, 20 significant with the knockdown before the sloppy takedown attempt where he pulled guard. So Austin now extends his losing streak to 2. His official record is 0 wins, 2 losses, 1 no contest in the UFC. His only win was the one coming in his second Contender Series victory. His first opportunity, he lost against another former NFL player in Greg Hardy. Came back the second time, got the win, and has not done much with it since. But Janata stays undefeated, 7-fight winning streak, 2-0 in the UFC. Look out for another kickboxer moving up the ladder board. So what is next for him? Well, I think Denise in a fight with Muhammad Usman would be the next bout. I think that would be fantastic. He's already 32 years old, about to turn 33. He's in the middle of his prime. He's not some young, early bird. You got to throw him into damn near the top 15 and let him have a chance. And for Austin, if he is still in the UFC, I think he could fight Junior Tafa, as he's already fight his older brother, Justin Tafa, 2 times. And then the women got to show out. This fight played out damn near as you would expect. Karine Silva with a unanimous decision over Ariane Da Silva, which is a new last name, former Ariane Lipski. So really the tell for this fight for me was Karine was just too fast for Ariane. She, when she wanted to take down, she was able to get it pretty easily. She was able to advance positions well. She had a ton of top control, just very comfortable there. Didn't have a ton of submission attempts. And Ariane, while it was standing, had some decent strikes, maybe looked to have a little bit more power when they were actually standing and trading strikes. But I thought Karine was just better everywhere. Ariane was landing furies of combos when Karine would kind of come in and close distance. And that's really only the nice strikes she had. But when she was coming to close distance, she was getting the clinch or takedown fairly easy because Ariane was just kind of trying to hit her versus defend. And I don't think Karine was really ever in danger in this fight. Statistically, Ariane landed 89 total strikes, 42 of those significant. She had 2 minutes and 6 seconds of control time, while Karine had 53 total strikes, 27 of those significant, with 5 takedowns, although in 6 attempts. So again, she wanted the takedown. She was getting it. And she had an impressive 7 minutes and 32 seconds of control time, which you look at that statistically and you're like, wait a minute. This is exactly what I'm saying about the judges when it comes to the Austin Hubbard fight. They gave it to Austin with the grappling. The Onama fight, they told JSP to suck it pretty much. And then Karine, who was really doing well with top control but not throwing up a ton of submission attempts or ground and pound, they easily gave the fight to her. So it just seems like they don't know what they're doing sometimes. But Karine extends her winning streak to 9. She's 5-0 in the UFC, moves up 1 spot in the rankings to number 12. And Ariane ends her 3-fight winning streak. She starts a new losing streak. She is now 3-2 since 2022. and she moves down one spot in the rankings to number 13. They just flip-flopped. So where does Karine Silva go from here? I would love to see Karine take on Tracy Cortez. I think that would be a fantastic showdown. And for Ariane, she could take on Miranda Maverick. But then we went from women to some big light heavyweights. We had Bogdan Guskov with a round 2 knockout over Ryan Spann. Performance of the night. Hello moment for Bogdan Guskov. And this was another fight that was the tale of 2 rounds. As Ryan went to the grappling pretty early in the first round, I think maybe he just wanted to do a tire out and avoid the speed of Guskov. Because when you're fighting a light heavyweight, they're going to have power no matter who they are, light heavyweight or heavyweight. And if you got a guy that's faster than you, like, all right, let me take him down, tire him out. We'll come back to the well next round. And he was successful. He got the takedown, had a couple of small exchanges to get it. But much like the Austin Lane fight in round 2, Ryan just didn't seem like the same fighter. And Guskov was able to find the mark with a beautiful shot, and it completely shut Ryan's lights off. Massive moment for Bogdan Guskov. This was one of the fights I got wrong. I'm not surprised, but huge moment for him early in round 2. So statistically, Ryan landed 20 total strikes, 15 of those significant. He had 1 takedown in 3 attempts. He had a submission attempt and 3 minutes and 29 seconds of control time. And Bogdan landed 49 total strikes, 31 of those significant with the knockdown. So Ryan extends his losing streak to 3. He's 2-3 since 2022, and he moves down 4 spots in the rankings to number 15. Now Bogdan extends his winning streak to 2. He's 2-1 in the UFC. Welcome to the rankings, Guskov. He enters at number 12. So what's next for these dudes? Well, I'd love to see Ryan take on Kennedy and Shekaku. I think that would be a fun scrap. And for Bogdan, he can fight Azamat Mirzakhanov, another UFC newcomer who's really been on the rise. But for me, this fight card was about this man right here, Alex Perez, with a round 2 knockout over Matheus Nicolau. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Mr. Alex. And this really was completely a boxing bout. Alex was controlling the middle of the octagon, and Matheus, as he normally does, back against the cage, circling the octagon, looking for that counter shot off the cage. And in round 1, it was a lot of them filling each other out, finding the timing. Alex definitely, I feel like, was pushing the fight and landing the cleaner shots. But in round 2, boy, oh boy, did he find his timing on a beautiful shot with a absolutely clean, lawn-chaired knockout of Matheus Nicolau, which a clean flyweight knockout like that is not a sight you see too often. Usually they're more TKO style, but you have to feel for Alex Perez. What he's been through, this had to be so sweet for him. I mean, this guy has been through the ringer. He's in his prime. A guy like this could easily give up and have been out of the UFC. He's 32 years old, brand new, 32, just celebrated his birthday March 21st. He had lost to Muhammad Makayev, where he looked solid, but you're losing to a young dude. That's got to be somewhat of an ego hit at 31 years old to lose like a 24-year-old. Lost to current champion Alexandre Pantoja pretty embarrassingly, as well as the former champ Davison Figueiredo in 2020. He didn't fight in 2021. In 2020, before that fight, his last win was Jussier Formiga, Jordan Espinoza, and Mark De La Rosa, all guys that I believe are no longer in the UFC. And in your prime, you want to, provide for your family. I mean, a guy like this, what's Alex Perez getting paid? Let's say at this point he's getting 20 to show up, 20 to win. That would be my guess. Then you could win bonuses. He has not got a bonus since, the last 2 wins in 2020, he's on back-to-back flyweight bonuses, so decent money. So let's say he got 40 for those wins. That's 80 for 2 fights plus 180 grand. Most people make 180 grand. That's without taxes. Usually you take 50 to 60%, depending where you're living, what's going on out of that. So let's just say he made 120. That's a lot of people's salary in the year, but they're not having to pay a full-time manager maybe, if he has a manager agent, the gym, your nutritionist, all the working out things that you have to do, plus he's a family man. I mean, that has to be stressful to try to live on that. After 3 losses, he's getting only $20,000. That's $60,000 in 3 years time frame. And your mental, you're on 3 losses. Some guys get crippled by that. I did watch the post-fight interview where he talked about it a little bit. I thought the interviews could have been a lot better. One of my favorites lately has been Brian Ortega on some podcasts, and it all started from the guy, used to be called OG. He runs the Full Send MMA. He asked Brian, like, I don't want to ask how you are as a fighter, just as a person. Like, I want to know how Alex is really feeling as a person there. What are some of the things he's gone through? How much of a release and relief is that? You got to root for guys like that. And I picked him as the underdog. The dog was coming to eat and put on a damn performance. And you got to love it. You got to love it. You got to root for the guys. I am not a massive Alex Perez fan or Matheus Nicolau, but I thought he had the dog in him, and he showed out with a little bit of bark. But, yeah, solid UFC Apex card. I'm not too mad about it. You don't get a lot of brilliant UFC Apex cards. Statistically, not a lot here. Matheus landed 22 total strikes, 22 significant as well, compared to Alex's 28 total and significant, plus the knockdown. Beautiful lawn chair crippling knockout. So Matheus now extends his losing streak to 2. He's 2-2 since 22. He moves down 3 spots in the rankings to number 8. And Alex ends that 3-fight losing streak, starts a new winning streak. His first win since June of 2020. He moves up 3 spots in the rankings to number 5. So what's next? Well, I'd really enjoy a scrap between Alex and Kai Kara France, to be honest. But he has already announced to be rebooked against Tagir Olenbekov. So we get Alex making a very quick turnaround, trying to get that bread, keep the momentum going, as that fight was scrapped to Tagir pulling out. So now he's getting that rematch, I believe, in June. And then for Matheus, I had him matched up against Tagir Olenbekov, but now that that fight's been announced, I'm not too sure. Let's look at the rankings, I guess, real quick. See if we could find a new opponent for Matheus, who's definitely had some up and downs now. Has he fought David Dvorak? That might be a good fight. On the fly matchmaking here, that's what happens when you have it written down and then they make these changes. He has already fought him, so work with me here. So 2 wins coming in since 2022, looking good. Made his way damn near the top 5. How about has this guy fought in the UFC recently? 2 canceled fights. I don't think that's his fault. Let's square up Alan Nascimento and Matheus Nicolau, 2 Brazilians. I don't know if they don't want to fight or not, but that's the fight that I am going to pick. Either way, let's talk all about the Brazil as we have UFC 301 this weekend. Early prelims at 3 p.m. Pacific on Fight Pass. I believe when they say that, it's always on ESPN Plus as well. The prelims on local television. We got prelims at ESPN2 at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then, as you know, main card on pay-per-view. If I were to preview the card, I feel like a lot of people are kind of down on this card because it doesn't have a massive main event. Anything post UFC 299, again, your boy got to see that in Miami. Once in a lifetime experience. Then you have UFC 300. These 2, hands down, the best UFC cards of all time. With so many solid matchups on this card, it's good. It's going to be a downward trend from those, though. You can't match 299. You can't match 300. It is missing that big headliner. If Alex Poatan could have fought, Yuri Prochazka here in the rematch, that would have really made it good. But this is a solid card. I think the most hype in this card is the Jose Aldo fight. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Every fight has a Brazilian fighter. Again, Rio de Janeiro, the king of Rio. Every fight has a Brazilian fighter on the card. I can't wait to see the crowd. The energy should be insane. I'm giving this card a solid 7.58 out of 10. We won't break down every single fight, but some good fights early. We have the Contender Series alums, Alessandro Costa representing Brazil, taking on Kevin Boras at flyweight. And then we have Contender Series alum Mauricio Ruffy, Brazil, taking on Jamie Malarkey. But we're going to kick this sucker off in the early prelims. We have Ismael Marreta Bonfim, 28 years old with a 19-4 record, taking on Vince from Hell Pichel, 41 years old with a 14-3 record. Now, here we get the opportunity for a young stud, not quite in his prime at 28. I'll reiterate, for me, the fighting prime is 30 to 35. It's starting to itch a little younger now that the MMA kind of circuit to get to the UFC has changed. But my theory is it takes so long in the pro circuit and for guys that start in the MMA to get to the UFC that they're getting to the UFC in their late 20s. That's why the 30s usually their prime after a couple of UFC fights. They're starting to get younger with the Contender Series, Ultimate Fighter, and all the promotional things we have. We're seeing kids coming in, damn early. So that's going to change, but I still think 30 to 35. A guy like Ismael, 19-4, he's pretty much in his prime. But we get to see him take on a well-rounded veteran. Although 41 years old is still tough, and I think he is going to push Ismael. I think he's going to try to finish his career on a high note. Who knows if he's thinking retirement? I haven't looked into any interviews from him or anything like that, or if he's even close to that point, but you would assume at 41 years old, that's got to be close. But breaking this down, Ismael is a Jungle Fight alum, LFA and Contender Series alum. He's on a one-fight losing streak and is 2-1 in the UFC. 9 of his 19 wins are via knockout, 4 via submission, so 13 of his 19 wins come via finish. All 4 of his losses are via submission, which is kind of a shocker to be honest. And then Vince is a orthodox fighter. He trains out of Factory X with a black belt in BJJ. He's an Ultimate Fighter alum. He's on a one-fight losing streak, and he didn't fight in 2023 after he pulled out due to injury. Ismael actually stepped in that fight, who happened to be against Benoit Saint-Denis. So they were then supposed to fight back in November of last year, but Bonfim weighed in at 3.5 pounds over. The fight ended up being scrapped. So this has been a long time in the making. 8 of Vince's 14 wins are via knockout, and he does have a 4.5-inch leg reach advantage. Kind of unique. But man, both of these men, again, it's a long time in the making. They've been prepping for each other since about August of last year, roughly, is when fight camp would have started before that November matchup. And I do believe that Vince is going to have his moments in this fight. Ismael's not just going to run through him. I do think Bonfim is going to be too powerful. He's going to put on a treacherous pace on Pichel, and that might play in Pichel's favor. He's not afraid to be a gunslinger. I really just think Bonfim is too well-rounded. I think he's going to get the job done. He's a pretty big minus 500 or greater favorite. For that reason, I am taking Marreta. I'm putting Ismael Bonfim on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We got Brazil taking that dub. We got Drakkar Klose, 36 years old with a 14-2-1 record, taking on Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva, 35 years old with a 13-5 record. Now this is going to be an interesting fight. We got some heavy-hitting men that aren't afraid to exchange. Drakkar, I believe, will have the wrestling advantage in this fight. Silva, if you have a Neto BJJ nickname, I would assume he's going to have the BJJ advantage. But if they decide to bring this fight elsewhere outside of kickboxing, because they're both at grapplers, I might be surprised. 2 grapplers sometimes equals a savage striking bout. Breaking this down, Drakkar is an orthodox fighter. He trains here locally out of Phoenix in the MMA lab. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's an RFA alum. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, and 6 of his 14 wins come via knockout. Now, Joaquim is a orthodox fighter. He has a BJJ and Muay Thai style. He has a black belt in BJJ and a black Kroang in Muay Thai. He's a tough Brazil alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He is 2-1 since 2022. 7 of his 13 wins come via knockout, 3 via submission, so 10 of his 13 wins via finish, and 3 of his 4 losses are also via knockout, to knock out or be knocked out. Now, I do think Drakkar is going to control the distance in this fight. Eventually, maybe look for some takedowns just to mix it up a little bit. You obviously have to be careful to not be in a spot where you're blast doubling into a guillotine or putting yourself in submission danger. But Drakkar close on the odds, about minus 180 on average. I do believe that. I think Drakkar is re-emerging since his injuries. He started hot, knocking out. I'm blanking on his name. Beneil Dariush has gone through some injuries and some adversities, but I think he is fighting at a very high level. I'm putting Drakkar on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. So I got America against Brazil in that one. And now setting us up in the prelims, we have William the Jaguar Gomez, 26 years old with a 13-2 record, taking on Gene Lord Silva. We got a lot of Silvas. 27 years old with a 12-2 record. Now, this really is an interesting matchup between two men that are a little bit younger, still kind of finding their way in the UFC, and they're trying to make names for themselves. They're trying to build that stock, get people who are more casual MMA fans and understanding of what they're all about in their UFC careers. And neither men have faced many losses in their career. They're full of confidence. I expect this one to be a banger. Now, William trains out of the MMA Factory. He is on an 11-fight winning streak, 3-0 in the UFC. 7 of his 13 wins come via knockout. He does have a 4-inch reach advantage and a 6.5-inch leg reach advantage. This boy is long. Now, Gene is a Contender Series alum. He is also on a very impressive 9-fight winning streak, 2-0 in the UFC, and 9 of his 12 wins come via knockout. Much like the stats would tell you, I think this is going to be a high-flying matchup, a little bit of chaos, maybe some wild, unorthodox striking combinations, fighters coming in with sloppy, kind of rangy attacks that might not have the best technique, and they're going to look to finish this fight. I think that Williams' length is obviously going to pay dividends. We've seen him against better competition in the UFC thus far, in my opinion. Although I do think this is the toughest fight of his career, the biggest stage of his career. But both men are young in their MMA careers. I think the rangy William Gomez is going to be able to keep Silva at range, land some big shots. But this is going to be one hell of a dance. I'm taking the Jaguar. I'm putting Gomez on that parlay as an underdog. He's coming to eat. Moving on, we have Miktabek Oralbai, 26 years old, with a 12-1-1 record, taking on Elves Brenner, 26 years old, with a 16-3 record. Now, here is more of a clash of style showdown. We have two very young and talented lightweight prospects. I think will be a problem in the division for some time. Oralbai is going to look for takedowns early and often to get the victory here. But breaking it down, Miktabek trains out of Team Alpha Male. He's an LFA alum. He's on a 7-fight winning streak, 1-0 in the UFC. 6 of his 12 wins via knockout, 5 via submission. So 11 of his 12 wins come via finish. Now, Elves trains out of Shoot Box Diego Lima. Brazil. He is on a 5-fight winning streak, 3-0 in the UFC. 11 of his 16 wins are via submission. This reminds me a lot of Arman Sarukian versus Charles Oliveira. I think Oralbai is going to be too much with his grappling for Brenner to avoid. There is the possibility that Elves can get a submission, but I don't think that is his best path to victory. I think it's with his striking as he's going to be able to test Orolbai in that department. He's going to come forward with the pressure. We saw him in that Savage fight coming forward like a zombie. If he could avoid takedown attempts early, I think he's going to have a chance. But I am taking the favorite, about 260 on average. I'm taking Orolbai. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that age down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Yasmin Lucindo, 22 years old with a 15-5 record, taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz, 38 years old with a 16-7 record, and the number 13 next to her name. Now in this matchup, we are getting a very bright young Brazilian prospect who is really getting an opportunity to show off here versus a veteran who is fighting the best she has in her long career at 38 years old. Now, I'm surprised at how heavy the odds are in this fight, leaning towards the 22-year-old, as Lucindo is a minus 400 or better on most books. But breaking this one down, Yasmin is on a 2-fight winning streak. She is 2-1 in the UFC since 2022. 8 of her 15 wins come via knockout, 3 via submission. So 11 of her 15 wins come via finish. At 22 years old, that is very impressive. Now, Karolina is an Invicta alum. She is on a 4-fight winning streak herself. And breaking it down, I mean, Yasmin definitely is going to have the power advantage here. I do think Karolina is going to have better technique. I think she's going to have the IQ advantage. I think being in the front of the home crowd in Rio, there's going to be a lot of chaos coming before this one. I think that might, raise up the juices for Yasmin a little bit, and she's going to get a little crazy and chaotic. And she may even attempt some takedowns throughout this fight. That might be a better path to victory for her. But I do think Karolina is going to come in, have a solid game plan with her team, look to get Yasmin uncomfortable, push forward with a ton of volume, and try to tire Yasmin out. A lot of good footwork, a lot of head movement. Try to get her deep in the fight. See what she's really made of. She's going to look to steal the rounds, get a decision victory here. And she is coming off a win against Diana Belbita, who I think is just as good, if not better, right now than Yasmin. And, Yasmin already has suffered a UFC loss. I haven't seen quite what the books are looking at here. And at 22 years old, I am taking the underdog. I think Karolina is getting a massive win here in enemy territory. I am not putting it on a parlay, but I think the dog's coming. Moving on. I think a fight of the night contender here. We have Jack Tankshore, 29 years old with a 17-1 record, taking on Joanderson Tubarão Brito, 29 years old with a 16-3-1 record. Now, I know this is out of nowhere, but it just came to my memory. Jack Shore beat one of, Montana's best, Hunter Azure, former UFC fighter when they fought in the UFC, when Jack was still fighting at bantamweight. Hunter had another attempt at the UFC in the Ultimate Fighter Veterans. Didn't make it out. He fought in the UFL Fusion Fight League or something like that. The fourth one here in Chandler, Arizona, and got a brilliant knockout. So shout out to Hunter Azure. He won the title there. Hopefully he can find himself back in the UFC. But breaking this fight down, this is going to be a scrap, man. Right before the main card, really get the juices going in Rio. And it's just two really well-rounded fighters. They both have solid striking, solid power. They're well-rounded with good grappling, and they're right in the start of their primes. Breaking it down, Jack has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Cage Warriors alum and former champion with 1 successful title defense. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He is 2-1 since 2022, but is new to the featherweight division. 9 of his 17 wins are via submission. Now, Joe Anderson trains out of Shootbox João Emilio. He is an LFA and Contender Series alum. He's on a 4-fight winning streak. He's 4-1 since 2022. 7 of his 16 wins are via knockout, 7 via submission, so 14 of his 16 wins via finish. Now, I do believe both of these men are going to be a problem in the featherweight division. They're entering their fighting primes. They're going to put on one hell of a show before the main card. I just think Jack is going to be more technical. I do think Brito will probably have the power advantage. But I am interested to see if this fight has any grappling mixed in. If someone's going to push the pace there, I do think it'll be Jack. He's going to mix it in well. I think he's just the more well-rounded. Joe Anderson's powerful, takes more risks. He might find himself catching him in front of the Rio home country crowd. But I'm taking, let's see, is the underdog, Jack Shore, averaging plus 140. Some nice money to potentially be made there. I'm taking another dog. I am not putting him on a parlay, but boy, are the non-Brazilian dogs coming to eat. Now we have the main card. We got Caio, the natural Baralho, 31 years old with a 15-1 record and the number 14 next to his name, taking on Paul Bear Jew Craig, 36 years old with a 17-7-1 record and the number 13 next to his name. Some people, you look at the odds here, Baralho's like a minus 550 or better favorite. I think this is actually a really good, well matchup for where these two are at in their careers. And I think it's going to make for a great fight. Now, Paul is 1-1 since he moved down to middleweight. He is getting a ranked man in his prime who is a very good grappling heavy fighter. Neither men have the best technical striking, but they're solid in that department, and I do expect them to let it rip in this fight, which is great for us fans. Now, Caio has a black belt in BJJ. He's got a brown belt in judo. He's a Contender Series 2-time alum, mostly because he grappled a lot in the first victory, and that wasn't enough to improve the UFC brass. He's on a 14-fight winning streak, 6-0 in the UFC. And Paul, he's got a black belt in BJJ as well. He has the second most performance of the night bonuses in UFC history with 8 of them things. The second most submission wins in UFC light heavyweight history with 6. And he has the most triangle choke submissions in the UFC light heavyweight division with 4. He's currently on a 1-fight losing streak. He is 2-3 since 2022. 13 of his 17 wins are via submission, and 4 of his 7 losses are via knockout. Again, I think this is another great matchup on the card. It's hard to pick against the young stud in his prime. His confidence meter is blasted at the top. He's a pretty well-rounded fighter, and I just think he's going to bring the fight to Paul. I think he's going to get takedowns. You know, he's going to want to just avoid those triangles and those crazy submission attempts that Paul's going to be flying around. I think he will do well there. A lot of top control, hopefully not a, completely grappling heavy bout. I would love to see these two stand and strike. But I am taking the Brazilian. I'm taking Baralho. I'm putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We got Michel the Demolador Pereira, 30 years old with a 30-11 record. In a short notice bout, taking on Ihor, the duelist Potieria, 27 years old with a 20-5 record. Now, this is a short notice matchup. Michel was scheduled to fight Makhmud Muradov, but he withdrew due to an infection. So now Pereira is going to be able to take on a young striker who's usually fighting light heavyweight brass. And Pereira is a huge favorite. Minus 550, some books minus 675. But breaking it down, Michel has a black belt in BJJ, a black belt in karate. He has his last 3 fights have been performance of the night or fight of the night. I got to see him do a brilliant knockout against Michael Olegchuk in the 305 in Miami. He's a Jungle Fight alum. He's on a 7-fight winning streak, 8-2 in the UFC. One of the losses was even a DQ due to an illegal knee. He has 11 of his 30 wins come via knockout, 8 via submission, so 19 of his 30 wins via finish. Now, Ihor is a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak, 3-3 in the UFC. 9 of his 20 wins are via knockout, 6 via submission, so 15 of his 20 wins via finish. And 4 of his 5 losses are via knockout. Now, I think Ihor is going to be able to have some striking success against Michel. Michel's not the most technical guy. Ihor does good at fighting at range. But Pereira is going to come and bring the fight out early. He's going to come out hot like he always does. If Ihor can weather the early storm, I believe the fight can start swinging into his favor. But I think Michel is going to keep coming. He's shown that he's really improved his cardio for 15 minutes. I think it's just going to be too overwhelming with his striking and power, and he's going to take a lot of risks. He could get caught, but I am taking the Vegas favorite. I'm taking Brazil. I got Michel Pereira. We put him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Vitor Icao Petrino, 26 years old, undefeated with an 11-0 record, and the number 15 next to his name, taking on Anthony Lionheart Smith. 35 years old with a 37-19 record and the number 10 next to his name. Now, Petrino is a minus 550 on average favorite, big favorite here. But here we're getting an OG taking on the new young prospect who has really shown out. He's looking to move into the top 10 at only 26 years old. Now, Vitor is a powerhouse. He still has a ton to learn. He is a very green fighter. And he's taking on Anthony Smith, who is fighting for relevancy, the respect on his name, to keep his spot in the top 15. And his only big wins, really since 2021, are the 2 back-to-back wins against Ryan Spann. So he's looking to put a good name on his resume. Before I break the fight down, it's funny, I got to chop it up with Anthony Smith in Miami for like 35, 40 minutes before we were waiting for our sushi reservation at Nobu. You know, a couple espresso martinis deep, we were chopping it up and talking about the fight game. The fight wasn't announced until that following Tuesday. He told me he had a fight announced. I squeaked in there if he could give me who it was. He told me this was it. And I kind of had a reaction like, dang, like, I guess you want a good name. You want to prove yourself. This is the guy to do it because he's so green. But the guy has a ton of challenging aspects to his game. So mad respect for Anthony Smith taking this. A lot of people kind of disrespecting him. I've always enjoyed him as a fighter, as an analyst. So excited to see this one. But breaking it down, Vitor is a Contender Series alum. Again, he's undefeated, an 11-fight winning streak, 5 of them in the UFC, and 7 of his 11 wins come via knockout. Now, Anthony trains at a Factory X. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Cage Fury alum and former champ. He also was a Strikeforce, Bellator, and RFA alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. He is 1-3 since 2022. 20 of his 37 wins are via knockout, 14 via submission, so 34 of 37 via finish, and 11 of his 19 losses are via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out. And I think people forget that Anthony Smith's a finisher like that. You got 37 pro fights, a lot of these in the UFC. You're getting 34 of 37 via finish. You better put some respect on his name. Now, Vitor has definitely had a lot of brilliant flashes. I mean, this guy is built like he should be in a DN, a league MVP DN or outside linebacker. The guy is a brick shithouse. When he has gone the distance, he has been able to win with takedowns and top control in his fights. He is very offensive with his striking. I would say he has little to no striking defense. He's just a forward train coming at you. You got to be able to stop him. And he overwhelms guys. I think Anthony, if he can avoid the takedowns early, this reminds me a little bit of the Curtis Blades, Jailton Almeida fight. You could avoid the takedowns early, or you could gas him out a little bit. You keep Vitor moving, circling with good footwork, finding your openings, picking your shots to win the early round, and you take the time to win on the scorecards. I really do think he has a shot here. I think, obviously, Anthony's going to have to weather that round 1 storm. And if he does, I do think he's going to have a good chance to get the dub as a massive underdog at plus 400 average odds. Petrino, again, is still so green. He has a lot of errors and just sloppiness to his game. And when it comes to the top 15 of the light heavyweight division, you got to be ready unless you can just powerhouse your way through. I have been so back and forth on this fight. For the sake of picking, I am going to take Petrino. I think he's going to come too early, probably win round 1, maybe still round 2, or really go in for a finish. I am not putting this on a parlay. This would be a very fun fight to sprinkle some money on the underdog if you're looking for a good cash out. But I am taking Petrino. He's going to put on for Brazil and let the Rio fans go nutty. But this is really the people's main event. UFC 300, we had the BMF, the people's main event. We all know what's up. But we got the king of Rio, Jose Jr. Aldo. 37 years old with a 31-8 record, taking on Jonathan Dragon Martinez. 30 years old with a 19-4 record and the number 13 next to his name. It's not often you would see Jose Aldo without a ranking, but the king of Rio is back in Rio, out of retirement. I'm pumped. You should be all pumped. We're going to be pumped. But you want to know who's going to be pumped? Rio is going to bring it. Now, he is going to take on a savage kicker. A guy who is in his prime. I'm sure he's taken a thing or two over the years from what Jose Aldo did in the UFC. But we got to remember, Jose is like the OG leg kicker. Aldo not only took 2023 off after his loss to Merab Dvalishvili in August of 2022. But he looks fresh, man. He looks fresh. He looks the eagerness to fight. And I don't think he retired because he did not have the ability anymore. I think, not being the top of the division, not being in title contention all the time, that had to play a big part. But he looked solid in that fight against Merab, and he looked solid in the fights before that. But let's break this down. Jose is an orthodox fighter. He has a black belt in BJJ, a black belt in Luta Livre. He won the gold in the 04 CBJJO Worlds Jiu-Jitsu. He was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame class of 23. He's the former featherweight champion, former interim featherweight champion with 7 successful title defenses. He's different. He has the most successful title defenses in UFC featherweight history with those 7. The most consecutive, not only were they 7 successful, 7 consecutive successful title defenses as a record. He has the most title fights in UFC featherweight history with 11. He's the WEC featherweight champion. He had 2 successful title defenses before the WEC was bought by the UFC. He's the youngest champion in WEC history at 23 years old and 70 days. Technically, he didn't get that because he was WEC. In my book, he's the youngest champion. John Jones has that in the UFC at like 23 and 180-something days. But the true champion, I'm going to give him credit because those weight classes weren't in the UFC at the time. He has the most consecutive wins in WEC history with 8. He was the 2009 Fighter of the Year, 2021 Comeback Fighter of the Year, and he had the 2014 Fight of the Year against Chad Mendez. He's a Jungle Fight and WEC alum. He finished 3-2 since 2020 in his first retirement. All at bantamweight, which is crazy that older in his career he went down in divisions. And his last title shot was against Petr Yan for the Venkat Bantamweight Championship, I believe due to TJ Dillashaw's drug issue. But he lost via a round 5 TKO in that bout against Petr Yan when he was a world beater. Now, Jonathan has a blue belt in BJJ. He's a Legacy FC alum. He's on a 6-fight winning streak. 9 of his 19 wins are via knockout, and he has a 2.5-inch leg reach advantage. Now, I assume with Aldo coming out of retirement after a year that he has been training. He's been coaching. UFC Embedded this week has played into that a little bit. I doubt that he's just been chilling on the couch. That's just not who Jose is. And he's still in good shape. He was still fighting at a high level. I just don't know, not sure how game he's going to be like fresh in against a young buck in his prime trying to make a living off his name. Because Jonathan right now is the best version of himself. He just celebrated his 30th birthday. You know, he's feeling good. But again, Aldo looked really good against some high-level bantamweights before the Dwalish Wheelie fight, which then he was impressively taking, amazing takedown defense against the machine. He was a machine. I think he attempted like 30 takedowns. But he looked good in the win against Rob Font, solid striker, Pedro Munoz, and his cardio is still there. His takedown defense is there. He's not going to have to worry about that in his fight. He's only 37. I do think he's just a more well-rounded fighter than Jonathan. I heard that rumblings were he was supposed to fight Dominic Cruz here, which could you have imagined that back in Rio? But I am taking the king of Rio. I'm taking him in Rio. He's the underdog, plus 130 on average. We putting that on a parlay. That's how confident we are. We're all eating with the dog, and we marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Golly, I can't wait. Moving on in the main event, we have Brazilia's own Alexandre the Cannibal Pantoja, 34 years old with a 27-5 record, taking on Steve Astro Boy Erceg, 28 years old with a 12-1 record. Now, Astro Boy has definitely, to his nickname, just flown into the UFC and somehow has earned himself a title shot versus the most well-rounded fighter in the division, and he only has 3 wins in the UFC. I think the benefit for him is the top 5 has fought each other like 2 to 3 times already, so they needed a main eventer. They called up Steve. He's like, let's do it. But this will be 5 months from Pantoja's last title defense, which you got to think, you earned the title. You got back-to-back main event champion 5-rounder fight camps, which definitely wears on you. There's been the statistic of UFC champions 35 on and how that's really bit them in the butt. But Pantoja's a young 34. He has ran through the top of the division. I believe he's going to do the same because Steve is still a young lad who has a lot to add to his game, and I think he has a lot to learn in the UFC. Breaking this down, Alexandre trains out of American Top Team. He has 1 successful title defense. 3 of his last 4 fights have been performance of the night or fight of the night. He's showing up. He's showing out. He's an RFA alum. He's on a 5-fight winning streak. 10 of his 27 wins are via submission, 8 via knockout. So 18 of his 27 wins via finish. And Steve is on an 11-fight winning streak. He is 3-0 in the UFC. 6 of his 12 wins are via submission. And no fight was better than his last with a clean early knockout. Now, Steve, he does have some solid wins. I'm not saying he's a bad fighter. I'm not trying to smear his name in the ground or say that he's not good enough. But he has not fought the level that Pantoja is providing right now, especially in the grappling department. And I do think Pantoja is going to take Steve down, try to wear him out like he typically does, cannibalize him, playing into the nickname. But I also think that Alexandre is going to have his moments when it comes to striking. I think he's going to continue to get Astro Boy down to the canvas. And when it comes to Steve's path to victory, I think it would be via knockout. I don't see him being able to knock out Alexandre, as he hasn't been finished, and he has fought better strikers. He's a tough, durable dude, and I don't think he's going to win in rounds. He's never been in a 5-round fight. This is his first 5-round championship fight, and I'm not sure how he would still 3+ rounds against Pantoja. The sad part for Alexandre is he has to come after that Jose Aldo win, because I am telling you, the king of Rio will not be denied in that fight. I mean, Jonathan Martinez would just have to, have a crazy leg kick knockout, and he's not going to outkick the kicker. So you're going to have to live up after that brilliant performance. That's going to be tough to do with the crowd, but Brazil will be backing him. I'm saying, and still, I'm taking Alexandre Pantoja. We putting him in that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. But for those of you that are, post-COVID UFC fans or MMA fans, the one thing that if you're buying the pay-per-view, tune in and see how the crowd reacts, see the energy in there. I always like seeing how different countries do with fights. Rio has been nutty before. The image of Jose running into the crowd, holding up the flag on his buddy's shoulders will never be erased from my mind. And I'm just excited for that energy. I don't get to be there in person, but we'll get it on pay-per-view. And what's also going to be fun is just seeing that moment, the song, the walkout, the run this town for Jose Aldo, seeing the support behind, one of the newer champions, Alexandre Pantoja, putting Brazil on his back. I'm so hyped to see the aura, the energy. Those are things that I'm going to be tuning into. Let's see if the fans show up early. There's, a Brazil fighter on every single fight on this card. And we'll see how Brazil does. I think Brazil is going to have a little bit of a tough night in the office. I think they win more than they lose. But I don't think they're going to have a clean sweep by any means. But the more Brazil wins, the crazier the energy is going to be. I'm hyped up. UFC 301 this weekend. And next, we have a fight night card, but we aren't in a location. We're going to St. Louis, a solid fight night card headlined by Derek Lewis and Rodrigo Nascimento. So we'll be talking about that next week on episode 47 when I'm back from Seattle. But again, episode 46, I'm your host, Shane Gillette. Be a friend, spread the word, like, subscribe, add the comments. Hit me up on socials. Tell me what you like, what you want me to talk about. Love to hear it. I'm all ears. Again, episode 46. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.